evening and welcome to Aliens Revealed Live. I'm your host, Dean Caparella. This is our first ever episode on the Paranormal UK radio network, and we have some amazing interviews to share with you. From alien abductions to monster-infested ranches to Men in Black. We speak to some of the most amazing people on the planet, ready and willing to share their chilling stories with you. All from the Aliens Revealed Live files here on the Paranormal UK radio network. Well, alien men or agents of the government? Who are the real Men in Black? While the Men in Black movies really brought these mysterious figures to prominence, those who have encountered them in real life will paint a completely different picture. Creepy, scary, chilling and uncomfortable are just a few of the words used by those unfortunate enough to encounter them. The question is, are they alien men or are they humans working for the government? UFO researcher and author Nick Redfern has penned several books on both the men and women in black. Redfern knows more about these creepy characters than most. The Men in Black have been captured in various forms over the years, including on closed-circuit video. In many cases, though, the quality has been less than desirable. Redfern had his own Men in Black encounter. It's one he related to Aliens Revealed Live recently. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was still creepy and chilling. In fact, enough to convince the well-known researcher that researching and writing about these symptoms of the UFO phenomena can have its consequences. The Men in Black are notorious for showing up almost immediately following UFO or close encounter events. Their ability to be a Johnny on the spot almost instantly is one of the reasons they create so much concern for people. And it also brings into question whether they are actually human. If reports are anything to go by, fictitious odds makers would have them short-price favourites to be anything but human. Redfern has interviewed many witnesses and the descriptions are eerily similar. Either their appearance or the swiftness with which they show up, these mysterious characters have a haunting presence. Nick Redfern is a full-time author and journalist specialising in a wide range of unsolved mysteries. The Men in Black and women are too, and he's written 3 books on the subject. In fact, on all things UFO and paranormal related, Nick has written at last count almost 40 books, and he joins us now. Hi, Nick.
If I uninstalled it, I would have to pay to have the whole thing reinstalled.
Oh, right. No, well, yeah.
But I don't, because turning it off didn't work, I'm guessing uninstalling it probably wouldn't have worked either. So.
Yep. Hey, I was going to ask you, I'm interviewing Peter Robbins on Sunday, and he sent me his new video, which I haven't released yet, but he just sent me the copy he's got on his Google Drive on James Forrestal. And I think you've done a bit on him as well.
Yeah, he has. He's done a lot of research. I keep telling Peter, actually, to do a book on it all, because he was thinking about doing one. So you should say that Nick told you you've got to write that book. Yeah. But that's quite interesting. I watched it last night, but there's a bunch of questions, and I'm going to kind of get it around to, being UFO related, and I think, the smoking gun obviously is that diary that went missing, and but that's quite interesting, and the fact they're trying to erase him from history, and which doesn't surprise me. I mean, that's what that's what the left are doing at the moment with a lot of history in school, and erasing a lot of it. But hey, and the other thing I was going to ask you too, do you know anyone that could speak on alien healing, like UAP healing? I had Joseph Burks lined up, but he had to be called away yesterday, and I'm not sure whether he can come on anytime soon. But I reckon that's just a fascinating subject, because I think that ties in a lot with what Jesus was doing a couple of thousand years ago. Healing people. But with the abductees that come back and say, that they've had all this, they've had these terminal diseases healed and that type of thing. But I reckon that's pretty fascinating. Unfortunately, I don't actually know anyone who's
who actually sort of focuses on that. I know that there are some books where it talks about people, who had encounters with aliens. I remember there was one famous story about a guy who had an old guy who had a UFO encounter, and afterwards he grew back like a second set of teeth.
Yeah, I've heard.
You might find that just by Googling those words.
Yep.
But unfortunately, I don't know anyone who actually has sort of, tried to put the whole thing together. Healing and UFOs.
Yeah, I know. I know if I did it. I'm hoping Joseph can get on, but I'm going to cop a lot of flack from the church and whatnot, obviously. But to even suggest that Jesus was even connected to being an alien, but so yeah, it'd be quite interesting. All right, I'm ready to go.
All right. And we've got 45 minutes, is it, to talk?
Well, 30 to 45.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you could have an hour if you wanted it, but
I was just sort of figuring how much to, what to talk about with the time we got, that kind of thing.
Yeah. We'll just go with the same format we started with yesterday.
All right, cool.
Okay, here we go. Nick Redfern coming up in 5, 4, 3, 2. Well, there's no more disturbing aspect of the UFO phenomenon than the stories about the men in black. Words such as creepy, eerie have been used to describe them, and when they appear, their effect on their targets is quite chilling. And now you can add the women in black to this mysterious phenomenon. Nick is a full-time author and journalist specialising in a wide range of unsolved mysteries. The Men in Black and Women in Black are 2, and he's written 5 books on the subject. In fact, on all things UFO and paranormal related, Nick has written at last count about 60 books. He joins us now. Hello, Nick.
Hey, Dean. How's it going?
Pretty good. Going to talk about a subject that really sends a shiver up a lot of people's spines, the Men in Black. And a couple of questions to start with. Who are they, and are they from the government?
Well, personally, I don't think they are from the government. I think this is one case or one phenomenon, if you like, that we can't sort of place at the foot of the Pentagon or, the government or any government. And I'll explain why that is. Now, if you ask most people outside of ufology who are the Men in Black, they'll probably say Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. And the reason being because the movies were so popular. They raked in millions upon millions of dollars all around the world. And what the movies did was to demonstrate to people outside of ufology. I mean, everybody within ufology had heard of the Men in Black, but the movies really presented the MIB to a worldwide audience. And, if you ask anybody pretty much who has no interest in UFOs, who are the Men in Black, people will say something like, oh, those are those guys who silence people who've seen UFOs. So everybody knows about them. But the movies, as entertaining and as fun as they were, they actually presented a scenario different to reality. And by that, I mean that in the movies, the agents work for this secret agency within the government that goes out and silences people who've seen UFOs. However, if you speak to the vast majority of all the witnesses to the Men in Black, they actually describe something very different. Namely, that the Men in Black don't actually appear to be wholly human, in the sense that people describe them as being extremely skinny, sometimes extremely tall. Their skin is sort of like the color of a bottle of milk. It looks like they're on the verge of final stages of anemia or something like that. Mm-hmm. And very often they wear these sunglasses, which are kind of weird in the sense that they look like a cross between sunglasses and ski goggles. And people have realized that when they got close to the Men in Black, or vice versa, they could see that they got these large bulging eyes hidden behind the glasses, as if they were trying to camouflage their appearances. And they also do that by wearing these old style fedora hats, which they pull down over their face as well. So when you think about it like that, it's not surprising that many people, witnesses and people in ufology, have come to the conclusion that the real Men in Black are actually a kind of alien human hybrid type entity that is nothing to do with the government, but there's still the same scenario that the Men in Black, whether human or extraterrestrial or paranormal, their goal is to silence people who've had UFO activity.
So how long have they been around, and what's their modus operandi?
Okay. Well, although the so-called modern era of ufology began in 1947 with the famous Kenneth Arnold case of seeing a squadron of UFOs, strange-looking aircraft, over Mount Rainier in Washington State, that's when the whole thing relating to UFOs began, as I said, in what we call today the modern era, even though it is actually 70 years plus now since it all happened. But what's particularly intriguing is that apart from just one or two very kind of scant and scarce cases, the whole phenomenon of the Men in Black didn't actually begin until the early 1950s. We're talking about 3 or 4 years after Kenneth Arnold made the term flying saucer famous. And it really began with a guy named Albert Bender. And Albert Bender lived in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And after the Second World War was over, Bender moved into his stepfather's home and rented out the attic room of the house. And the house that he lived in was kind of like a creepy old house, sort of like Norman Bates's house in Psycho.
Yep.
Sort of, the sort of classic creepy old house on the hill, that kind of thing. And Albert Bender was an intriguing character because he sort of really gravitated to the UFO phenomenon when it all kicked off in 1947. And by the time the early 50s came around, he decided to create his own UFO investigative group, which was called the International Flying Saucer Bureau. And he also put together a newsletter which he would send out regularly to subscribers all around the world. For example, he had fans and followers in Australia, New Zealand, the UK, the US, of course, where he was based, parts of South America, and so on. And he ran the IFSB for a couple of years, put out the journal for a couple of years as well. And then suddenly he quit ufology. And people were like, well, why is he quitting at the height of his research? And it turns out that at the height of his research, late one night when he was in his attic room, he started to feel ill and sick and dizzy and weak, and it felt like he was going to pass out. He laid down on the bed, and suddenly the room was overwhelmed by this overpowering odor of sulfur or brimstone, which is a sort of classic aspect of the supernatural, never mind just ufology. And he said that 3 men appeared in his room, and by appeared, I mean, he said they sort of literally materialized through the doors and the walls without opening them. And he described them as wearing black suits, skinny black ties, white shirts, black fedoras, and they had these white shining eyes. And he claimed that they warned him telepathically to leave the UFO subject alone or else. And Bender, in this sort of passing out state, essentially at that point at least, he decided or told them he would leave the subject alone, and then they just dematerialized in front of him. Now, this went on for several days and weeks, where he would see the Men in Black sort of following him late at night. One example, he went Saturday night to a local cinema, walking home, saw these 2 Men in Black sort of carefully shadowing him, and then they too just sort of vanished into nothing. Now, it's important to note that Bender was also deeply involved in the occult, And he spent a lot of time at what he called his paranormal altar in the attic, where he tried to, he performed rituals and rites to try and perform rituals to try and bring in entities from other forms of reality, if you like, dimensions. And that may be exactly what happened, that he actually really did open a doorway or a portal that allowed these MIB through. So it's kind of ironic that everybody thinks the MIB are from the government or a government, but the reality is that the very first guy who started the MIB mystery had encounters that had nothing whatsoever to do with the government.
Yeah.
And he shared the story with a friend of his, Gray Barker. Barker was a journalist, a writer, editor, and also worked in the film industry. And he saw the dollar value of Bender's story. And so he wrote a book in 1956 called They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. And that was the very first book written on the Men in Black. So that's how it all began, with Albert Bender's experiences and then Gray Barker spreading the story throughout the UFO community with his book.
What about some witness testimony that you've been able to gather with your research?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's interesting, because what I found is that all around the world, you have people who are seeing these men in black and women in black and being visited and threatened. Most of these people, if not the vast majority, don't know each other at all, and yet the experiences are extremely similar. Now, it typically begins late at night rather than during the day. There aren't that many reports where the MIB have turned up during daytime. It's almost always after the sunset and, the skies are dark and it's very dark outside as well. Most cases are sort of around about 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, sometimes after midnight. And of course, if you get a knock on the door, late at night, 9, 10 o'clock, you're going to think, who on earth's that knocking on the door?
Mm-hmm.
Most people would go to the door and sort of look through the little spy hole. And if you were to see 2 or 3 creepy guys all dressed in black with black fedoras standing on your doorstep at 11 o'clock at night, you're probably not going to open the door to them. You might call the police even. But the weird thing is, almost everyone does open the door. And with hindsight, the witnesses have said they felt almost as if they were mind controlled. Somehow they were driven to open the door to them. And you would imagine if they want to silence people, they might sort of slam the witnesses against the wall, and throw them out the room and threaten them in that way. But they don't. They actually just stand there and wait to be invited in. And the witnesses felt compelled to invite them in, even though they knew they shouldn't. And this angle of the Men in Black having to be invited in sort of ties in very much with the old legends of vampires having to be invited in to cross the threshold. If you don't allow them in, they can't come inside. And so you have that parallel. And again, most of the witnesses describe how they invited them in, knew they shouldn't, but something just couldn't prevent them from doing it. So the scenario from there is typically they come into the living room, the witness or the victim sits down, and then suddenly there is this warning not to talk about the UFO they saw yesterday or the alien abduction experience they had 2 weeks earlier, that kind of thing. The side effects are very weird. Many people, like Albert Bender, felt themselves sort of falling weak and tired, and almost if their energy was being drained from them by the Men in Black. And from that point onward, the Men in Black would then turn around and leave. And many of the witnesses described them sort of shuffling off in a line, the 3 of them, and it usually is 3 that turn up. So everything about these visits and threats is weird, and it's driven by sort of a sense of mind control. And I have cases which I would call 99% identical, but, one could be in Mexico. I've actually got a couple of cases that are almost identical to that scenario from Mexico, several from the north of England, a lot from the US. And, these people have never seen each other before, never met each other, and yet the stories are extremely similar. And I think this angle of mind control and forcing the witnesses to open the doors and also forcing them to sort of sit on the couch and not move for sort of 10, 15 minutes after the men in black have left, right, which of course gives them a good way of getting away. So that is sort of I guess you would call the typical scenario of your average MIB visit, if there is such thing as an average MIB visit.
The invitation aspect also seems to tie in with demonology too, where you literally have to invite them in. And when you mentioned the sulfur aspect earlier, I kind of thought, well, that kind of sounds familiar.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading recently, Brad Steiger made a good quote. He says, if there's a slow knock at the door, don't open it. The men in black are real, and if you truly devote yourself to pursuing this, then one can become in great danger. We're up against something that none of us can fully comprehend.
Well, that's actually a good quote from Brad. And he was actually someone who was in the right place at the right time, or the wrong time, depending on how you perceive it, because Brad did a lot of research into the men in black, and he found something that happened to him that has happened to a lot of people who investigate the MIB, not people who've been visited, but who actually investigate like Brad. And that is that if you start investigating and looking into the men in black mystery, you find that you don't become like you start off as the detached journalist or writer or researcher, but then you become part of the story, because the more you look into it, the men in black start turning the tables on you as well. It's almost as if, in a bizarre, almost paranoia-filled way, it's almost if you start thinking about the men in black and researching about them, they kind of know. And then they will sort of, as I said, they will turn the tables on you. And Brad was someone who actually was the perfect example of that. He told me for one of my books, actually my second book on the men in black, and he told me how the more he dug into the stories of the men in black, the more he would get weird stuff going on, like strange hang-up phone calls in the middle of the night. On several occasions, a number of his friends were threatened and visited by the men in black. And Brad realized that the more he got into it, the more and more that this would happen. So everything about the men in black is intriguing, because on the one hand, it clearly is all tied to the UFO phenomenon, but the agents, if you want to call them agents, really don't come across like from the government, or even from an extraterrestrial perspective. They really, as you pointed out, they do seem to tie more in with, issues surrounding the paranormal and the supernatural, and even demonology. So it gets into a lot of different belief systems and theories based on your own belief systems.
Yeah. Well, then, their nature, of course, seems to be intimidation and threatening and frightening their victims. But has anyone ever been killed that you know of?
Well, over the years, there have been a few mysterious deaths in the field of ufology, which I actually think were down to murder. However, those cases, while I do believe, that the people were murdered for various reasons relating to ufology, I'm not aware of any cases where the MIB actually killed or murdered anyone. But that's not to say there haven't been a lot of threats along those lines, and kind of putting the thought or the idea into the mind of someone without actually making it sort of 100% clear. So the witness, is thinking, wow, has that person just threatened my life, or is it just some sort of vague words, designed to frighten me. So, as I said, I'm not aware of any cases where the MIB have killed people, but one classic case where we have like a definitive threat of death goes back to 1976, and a UFO researcher named Dr. Herbert Hopkins. And Hopkins was someone who did a lot of deep, long-standing, extensive research into various UFO cases. And he was involved in the 1970s, mid-70s, into a lot of alien abduction research. And late one Saturday night, his wife and children had gone out to the cinema, and around about 8 o'clock, he got this knock on the door, as so many people have. And by that time, it was dark night, and he opened the door, and there was this creepy old wrinkled guy, sort of looking about 85 years old, black suit, black fedora. And of course, because Hopkins was someone heavily involved in ufology, he instantly realized he was one of these almost sort of mythical MIB. And the man in black in this case actually just strode into the room and came straight to the point, warned him to stop doing this alien abduction research, and also told him to destroy all of his old cassette tapes.
Wow.
Bear in mind, this was the 70s, he got, there was no other way to record anything back then, other than sort of clunky old cassettes. And he actually did destroy them just a day or so afterward. But the man in black brought or said to Dr. Hopkins, take those coins out of your pocket and place them in your hand so I can see them. And Hopkins was sort of puzzled and a bit worried that the MIB even knew that there were 2 coins in his pocket. How did the man in black know that? So he took them out, and in somehow, which Hopkins believed was some form of ancient alchemy, actually dematerialized or destroyed the coins. And the man in black said to him that I can do exactly the same thing to your heart, which again was like a threat. Now, of course, Hopkins wasn't killed, his heart wasn't destroyed, but it was enough for him to pretty much quit ufology. He went very well, sort of like low key after this particular experience. So, this is kind of the effect that it has on people. It's very much life changing because so many of them get out of ufology, which prior to that had been their major passion in life. Mm-hmm. So it really does demonstrate the ability of the MIB to successfully force people to get out of the subject.
Well, we hear people backing off when they get threatened. Do you know anyone who's ever challenged them?
Oh, yeah, that's actually a good point, because there are several cases where people have touched the MIB. In most cases, they don't touch the person and vice versa. I've got several cases, and I know Brad Steiger had a number of cases as well, where the people sort of lunged at the men in black. It was as if they were able to break that sort of spell of hypnosis and mind control. But when they went to grab the men in black, they got like a fairly severe feeling of like an electric shock had gone through their body. What the cause of that, I don't have an answer, unfortunately, but I know Brad suggested, that these could be energy type entities rather than flesh and blood creatures. Maybe they present themselves in the image of the men in black, or, that they can project almost a hologram type entity, but which is far more energy based than sort of physical, flesh and blood. But there are more than a few cases like that, where people have experienced that sharp sort of numbing electric shock, which you sometimes get, if you're messing around with the lights or something, and there's like a problem with the systems, and you get like a short electric shock, but so a lot of people reported that. the most disturbing aspect is that when people, again, have sort of like touched the men in black or tried to push them away, in the immediate days and weeks afterward, they start to fall down sick with, in some cases, extremely rare and bizarre illnesses, which in one or two cases have forced doctors and hospitals to actually find an expert into this particular case or this one, which affects something like 1 in 100,000 people. But I would write these types of cases off were it not for the fact that I've probably got easily 20 to 25 cases where people felt ill after in the presence of the men in black, and which in some cases, like flesh-eating diseases, that when people have this flesh-eating disease, that just eats away at your skin. Others went down with severe cases like pneumonia, and when this occurred, just in the aftermath of these encounters, for me, you have to wonder, is it some kind of like a supernatural infection, and maybe something that's deliberately, it's a deliberate infection rather than just, a side effect of the MIB themselves.
Yeah. Have any of them ever been captured on camera, either photo or film?
There are actually a handful of photographs. Probably the most famous one was took in the late 1960s by two researchers, Tim Beckley and Jim Moseley. Jim died a few years ago, but Tim is still in the UFO field, and he's still happy to talk about this encounter. It goes back to Jersey City in the United States, and one particular guy and his wife who lived in Jersey City at that time were Jack and Mary Robinson, and they were sort of the go-to guys in ufology in Jersey City back in the 60s. They ran a UFO group and they were plugged in with everybody. And Jim Moseley and Tim Beckley were friends of the Robinsons. And one morning, after Jack had gone to work, Mary phoned Tim Beckley and said, those MIB that you investigate, well, for the last few days, there's been one looking over the road from the opposite side of the road to our apartment, just staring at my apartment, and he's clearly looking at me. And now you don't really get repeat cases like this, which, Mary had seen this MIB for sort of 2 or 3 days. So Tim phoned Jim and said, why don't we get out there tomorrow morning at the same time that Mary said she's been seeing him, and let's try to see if we can get a picture. So they went out there, Jersey City, the next morning, about 8 a.m., rush hour time. But they managed to slow the car down outside of Mary's apartment, and sure enough, that guy was there. And they managed to get one picture because it was just rush hour traffic. And so, they couldn't stop the car. So they managed to get this one picture, which you can find online, and it's not like a hidden picture or anything like that. And in the picture, he kind of looks almost zombified. He's got like a black fedora, and if you blow up the picture and you look at the glasses that he's wearing, they do look more like ski goggles than sunglasses. They sort of bulge in, and he's clearly got like a black suit, a long black trench coat, and it looks like black gloves as well. And he's standing in the recesses of this doorway, and he does have this sort of almost detached zombie-like stance, just standing there. And so that was certainly one of the most intriguing ones from the 60s. In terms of modern times, not so much a photograph, but film footage. You can find online a very interesting piece of footage where these two MIB walk into the lobby of a hotel, and the footage actually was taken in the hotel. It wasn't a hoax by the hotel staff or anything like that. Now, whether or not the hotel staff themselves were hoaxed or this was a real case, that's where people have, whether they're believers or skeptics, fall into one camp or the other. But it was not anything hoaxed by the hotel people themselves. But if you watch the footage, everything about them is strange. You know, their hats are slightly bit bigger than regular fedoras, but they're dressed in black. And, you know, the two of them together, you could understand why people would see them and sort of make a second look, because you would imagine in one sense the MIB would want to stay covert and hidden, but everything about them jumps out. And that's why that film footage became so famous, because even the staff were like, well, you know, we've got to show this to somebody. Just so weird. So there aren't that many photographs and film footage. In fact, that's the only actual film footage that I know of that is, you know, genuine, or I believe it to be genuine. There are a couple more photographs, but they, you know, they're sort of just pictures of a guy in a black suit, which might just be a guy in a black suit, you know. But the Tim Beckley, Jim Moseley photograph outside Mary Robinson's apartment, that is, for me, is a genuinely sort of weird and eerie picture if you take a look at it.
Yeah. A colleague of ours, Debbie Stoner, recently told me in an interview that she actually recounted it on the interview of an incident with the men in black that actually took place in the daytime at a supermarket. And involving, I think it was a baby. I'm just trying to recall it, but so they can appear in the daytime.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that they've been seen during the day, but there's also no doubt that the vast majority of the reports do occur late at night. Now, some of these daytime ones are really creepy because, as you said, you know, people have seen them in stores and things like this, which sounds really weird. But in many cases, it seems to be that they're following either the UFO researcher or the abductee or the contactee. You know, they're making it clear that, I guess, you know, that telling the witnesses or the relevant person that, hey, you know, we can follow you any time of day or night, and we know where you go, you know, where you go, stores you go to, all this kind of thing. So I think the issue of, for example, like, you know, witnesses being in a store and then suddenly they look to the right or the left and there's a woman in black or a man in black staring at them. I think it's done very much to sort of psychologically destabilize the relevant person who has been targeted. And so, you know, when you've got cases like this where, you know, the MIB are sort of walking around the local Walmart or whatever, you know, it does sound extremely bizarre. But for the witnesses who've had these encounters, you know, it's terrifying, the idea that these things or creatures, whatever you want to call them, are literally following people day and night. But as I said, the two big differences are sometimes the surveillance and the following occurs during the day, but the threat occurs at night. So there are these sort of subtle different aspects which you can put together in so many different cases, you know, but they are sort of part and parcel of the same thing.
And you mentioned the women in black, so it's not just men.
Yeah. Now, I wrote a book actually on the women in black with a stunningly original title of Women in Black. And I thought I might as well just get to the heart of it, you know. Most people haven't heard of the women in black. But in saying that, I've got a lot of cases again. And I think one of the reasons why, or the primary reason why I was able to write this book is because as an author, you know, if you write a book on any subject, people read the books, they then contact you and share their experiences if they've had something similar. And over the years of writing these books on the men in black, you know, every so often I would get a story of a woman in black rather than a man in black. And to the point where eventually I had enough material to write a full-length book on the subject. And the women in black are very much almost identical to the men in black in the way that, you know, the men in black wear these black fedoras. Well, very often the witnesses have said that the women in black are wearing these long black wigs in kind of like a bangs type style. And so, you know, it sort of flops down and you can't see much of the face. And they also wear the black sunglasses and very pale skin. and skinny faces and bodies. So you have those parallels there as well. Now, one of the witnesses told me, and this is actually, if you think about it, makes a good point. You know, if they removed these long black wigs, took the sunglasses off, and that's all you could see then was just like the head. The witness said, well, you know, they might look like the sort of classic aliens that people talk about, you know, this skinny, pale, white face, pointed chin, and no hair. You know, I mean, they obviously got wigs on for a reason, namely that there's probably no hair under there. So, you know, if you, like I said, you remove the wigs, you remove the glasses, they're looking really pale and white, you could make a case that they are not entirely human, or could be human alien hybrids, if you like, or something along those lines. So, but as far as the cases are concerned, it's very much the same kind of thing, where a woman turns up, starts vaguely talking about just regular stuff on the doorstep, which baffles the witness anyway. And then they start getting into, have you had any strange dreams? You know, like you're not to talk about this experience you had 2 days ago. And then it kind of kicks in with the witness that this person is essentially threatening them about this UFO experience they had. I mean, one of the most bizarre ones of all was a woman named Shirley Cromartie, who actually worked in the President Nixon administration. And she was actually approached by one of these women in black. And John Keel, who wrote the Mothman Prophecies, Keel actually believed that Mrs. Cromartie had been targeted by the men in black as a means to demonstrate to the presidential office that the MIB could even get into the heart of the White House.
Wow.
So that's a very strange story.
Well, you mentioned the Mothman prophecies. I mean, it, along with the Kenneth Arnold UFO sightings and James Forrestal, just three cases that I've looked at in the last week, and every one of them mentioned the Men in Black. So it seems like if there's an event, it's an invitation for the MIB to turn up.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring up the Mothman matter, because, you know, the Mothman was this sort of flying humanoid type creature that was seen in the skies of Point Pleasant, West Virginia from late 66 to December 67. Now, there were some UFO activity in and around town at the time, and the Men in Black came into Point Pleasant and threatened a lot of the witnesses who'd seen UFOs. But they also threatened a lot of the Mothman witnesses as well. So this demonstrates that it's not just UFO activity and abductions and contact cases that the MIB get involved in. It's also in relation to sightings of strange creatures like the Mothman. Another example, I've got several cases of MIB encounters at none other than Loch Ness, Scotland.
Wow.
The weirdest one came from a guy named Ted Holliday. And Ted Holliday was someone who spent a lot of time in the 1960s and 70s at Loch Ness, and he wrote several books on the Loch Ness Monster and strange creatures, his most famous ones being The Dragon and the Disc, and the other one, The Goblin Universe. And he started off as someone who believed the Loch Ness Monsters were flesh and blood animals, like surviving dinosaurs or something like that. Over time, he started to get weird synchronicities, and his cameras would the pictures would come out fogged, or his camera would jam. And he realized or concluded that these creatures like Mothman, that the Loch Ness Monsters were also some sort of paranormal creature. And at the height of his research, he was confronted one day by a man in black right near the shore of Loch Ness, who dematerialized in front of him. And a year later, almost at that particular spot, Ted Holliday had a very severe heart attack, and then died at 59 from another heart attack just a few years later.
Wow.
And a few Nessie researchers believe that this MIB was somehow warning Holliday to to walk away from all this. And when he didn't, like Albert Bender, who fell sick, and then you've got Ted Holliday, who unfortunately died. So you also do have this, like I said, this connection between the MIB and strange creatures, whether it's Nessie, whether it's Mothman, and you have to wonder, how wide spread and wide physically, are the Men in Black when it comes to investigating cases. It's clearly not just around UFOs. It is embracing the paranormal and cryptozoology, the study of unknown animals as well.
Yeah. So, have you got any advice for people who want to get involved and follow this topic?
Well, I would say, if you're interested and fascinated by the Men in Black mystery, by all means dig into it, but be careful, because the big difference between investigating a UFO case or investigating something concerning the MIB is that you put together a case file on a UFO encounter, you share it with various people in ufology, and it goes no further. That's the end of it. It's like a really cool story which is on file in the archives. The big difference is that if you get involved with the Men in Black, they almost have like a radar which will alert them in a strange way that somebody's looking into them. And then, like Brad Steiger and a few situations I've been in, it's clearly the case that somehow they have a realization or an understanding that you're looking for them, and then they start, turning the screws, so to speak.
Right.
So the information or the recommendation for people would be, if you want to look into the MIB mystery, by all means do so, but be very careful that you can get some sort of almost like a supernatural backlash.
Yep.
And that's happened to so many people that it's not, as far as I'm concerned, it's not coincidence, it's not paranoia. It really is a case of you looking into it and they'll look back.
And I have to ask, have you ever had a visit?
Well, I actually had one experience of where I could, not quite a visit, but a very strange story. And it actually goes back to the 1960s. I was a little kid in the 1960s. I don't mean I was literally involved in this event in the 60s, but the story goes back to the 1960s and the novel and famous movie Rosemary's Baby. Which is this sort of occult, demonic saga. It's a very famous movie. And over the years, a number of people who've either read the book, Rosemary's Baby, or watched the movie have had a lot of strange experiences. And back in 2017, I wrote an article about this for an Australian website, Mysterious Universe. I wrote an article about all the weirdness that surrounded the book and the movie Rosemary's Baby, and how people, like I said, they'd either read the book, watched the movie, and then days after or even hours after, they started to get like poltergeist activity in the home and things like that. Well, I was literally writing this article, and then the next morning I got up and just sort of, I live in a second floor apartment, and I just peeked through the blinds and see what the weather was like. And there was this guy at the foot of the apartment block where I was, looking up at my apartment.
Wow.
And he had a black suit, black tie, fedora hat with a band around it. And he kind of looked like Herbert Hopkins's Man in Black, like an old, creepy old wrinkled guy. And you can just see on the picture that I took that his ears didn't look normal. They looked like little holes. Yeah. Now, what I did, he looked up at me, and I was like literally frozen, to see something like that. And then I got my phone to take a picture, and by the time I got back, he was starting to turn away. But I managed to get that picture, and it's actually in my latest book on the Men in Black, which is called The Black Diary, which is like a diary version of all the experiences I've had over in relation to the Men in Black. But so I was able to get like this side-on picture. By the time I put some shoes on and got back down and got down the steps, he was getting into another car with three other men. Now the other three were not in black suits, and they weren't in like a black car that a lot of the Men in Black witnesses say that they arrive in. But what he did demonstrate, if this was not some sort of extreme, bizarre coincidence, of massive proportions, if it wasn't that, then I can only say, the very fact that the night this all happened, the day after, the night before, when I've been writing this article about Rosemary's Baby and all these weird things that relate to it that people have experienced, and then the very next morning, not only did I open the blinds and see him, but I opened the blinds and saw him at the very same time that he happened to be looking right up at my apartment. That to me was beyond coincidence, and that was sort of probably the sort of freakiest, creepiest MIB kind of related event that I personally experienced.
Yeah, enough to bring on a change of underwear.
Well, I'm pretty good, at taking people on. I'm not sort of one of these wimpy types or whatever.
Yep.
I'll take them on,
Yep. So I guess the final bit of advice then for people, I guess, could come from Brad Steiger. If there's a slow knock at the door late at night, don't open it.
Yeah, don't open it. But if you do, be prepared for a lot of weird stuff that you really were not expecting to get.
Yeah. Nick, just closing, we've spoken to a lot of people in the last couple of weeks, and I just wanted to, I'm posing a question on disclosure just quickly. Have you got any thoughts on the disclosure topic?
Well, I do. The big problem I have with disclosure is not the possibility that it could come. I mean, it may come, but the big issue I have, and which goes back at least 20 years, is that, I can pinpoint people after people who've said, disclosure's coming next week, or it's coming next year, or I've got a high-ranking source in the Pentagon who's told me, it's coming 3 p.m. next Thursday or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost, for me at least, it's got to almost like the boy who cried wolf scenario. He cried wolf so many times, and when the wolf really came, and attacked him, nobody would listen because it was just, just the story was just going on. And that's how I kind of see the whole disclosure movement. My view is that if they've got something legitimate to say and hard evidence that disclosure is coming on this date, or it's going to come in the next couple of months, that's great. Tell us how you found it and provide us the data. But I've seen so many people in the field who I can bring out audio cassettes from the 90s. I can bring out, footage from conferences from the last few months where people who are pro-disclosure said, yes, it's coming, and we've been told this. But time and again, it doesn't come. So my view for the people in the disclosure field is either put up what you've got or shut up until you've got something 100% solid to share with us, Yeah,
it's a little bit like the end of the world prophets, giving a day and a date, time, and they just come and go.
Yeah, but that said, what I would stress is that, I do think that the whole issue, of end of 2017, we got the revelations that the government had got this secret UFO project, when we've been told actually the government was out the subject for years. Watching the developments since December 2017, when the New York Times broke this story, what I see is not just the fact that there was this group, but, that we've got media coverage, some of the insider data is now coming out. So you could make a case that this is sort of like the beginnings of a disclosure. because you know the media's picking up on all this now, mainstream media, not just the field of ufology. So I do sometimes wonder if part of the reason why the story of this group broke, and partly why the media is so deep into it as well, the regular media, this does make me think if somebody on the inside, you know, a group is sitting back and saying, okay, well, you know, they're reacting okay to this and the media is responding to this and nobody's sort of getting all hysterical. Maybe we should next week or next month release something else. And that seems to be what they're doing a little bit. We're getting even information about how the government was looking into places like the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, you know, and it makes me think that maybe this is like a slight trickle to see how the public is responding.
Yeah, and the other aspect too, I mean, thinking that I'm just wondering whether if it ever happens, it'll come out of the United States, because there is as much, if not more, UFO activity in places like Brazil, all over Europe, Russia. To me, it's probably got to be a collaborative event.
Well, yeah, I mean, I sometimes think, because I think the United States, more than any other nation probably, has got all the deep and dark data on UFOs. The big irony might be that the US might not want to have disclosure because it knows all the deep and dark secrets. Reveal stuff could be the ones that are actually out the loop of the, you know, the bigger story, because they haven't been told. So what's the problem with putting our material out? You know, it's kind of like that. Okay. But so I think, you know, if we are going to see disclosure, you're probably right that various nations would get together first and come together to make a statement. Yep. But in saying that, you know, I think there is the issue of not so much telling the whole story, but at least getting together and presenting snippets here and snippets there.
Yeah. Do you think what you ever had thoughts of what a post-disclosure world might look like?
Well, you know, if it's just something like, okay, we did find a UFO outside of Roswell, and we did find the bodies, and, you know, we still don't understand the technology. We got it stored away, and we've got 4 or 5 of these bodies in cryogenic storage, you know, and we've autopsied and pulled apart a couple more to try and figure out what they are. You know, if that's all it is, then I think most people would be amazed and shocked, you know, to actually have the proof. You know, it's one thing to read a book on Roswell. It's a different one to actually see the pummeled, pulverized, you know, rotted corpses of something from another world. So I think there would be massive amazement, and there'll be all this sort of discussions within the media. Are they friendly? Are they dangerous? Are they just sort of watching us, you know, for just their own interest? Yeah. You know, then there'll be questions. Well, how does this impact on religion? You know, that, you know, is there a God, or is everything, you know, extraterrestrial, or if there's life on Earth, you know, human life here? Well, you know, did God put creatures on other worlds as well? You know, people who are into religion or aren't, you know, there'll be these big debates on that kind of subject as well. Now, if the story is sort of far more disturbing, and it's not just that, oh, aliens visited, you know, and they crashed and we hid it, that's just one angle. But I mean, if you look at some of these stories where, like alien abduction cases, where, you know, they talk about, witnesses talk about, abductees talk about their souls being ripped out of them during abductions, you know, which is really kind of bizarre, you know. And you know, you have these tales about the aliens recycling human souls. That was one of the big portions of Whitley Strieber's research, that these things can literally extract their souls and recycle them. And So when you start getting into these categories, whether you believe in them or not, I think this could possibly really open the doors for a lot of disturbing stuff to come through. And maybe it's this more disturbing aspect which is making those who are in the know, I think it's probably making them reluctant to come out publicly, because they know that all this stranger, far more disturbing stuff is going to come suddenly tumbling out as well. So I think there could be potentially within government a situation where you have those who are pushing for disclosure, and there are those who say we cannot disclose because all of this really disturbing stuff is going to come out and we don't have a way to handle that, really.
Right.
So I think even within government there isn't like a 100% consensus as to what should be done. I'm sure the conversations that go on in the Pentagon or wherever are actually, ironically, like the one we're having now. You know, we think they've got all the answers and the approach to how we should do it. I think they're as much a difficult and an awkward situation as we are when it comes to trying to understand what disclosure might be and what the impact would be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fascinating subject. Nick, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Fascinating discussion today on the men in black and also the women in black. And as we said earlier, you hear a slow knock at your door late at night, just don't open it.
That's right, Dean. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Nick. Nick Redfern joining us today.
And I guess you you didn't get the camera. The camera never popped up at all.
Oh no. Well, I've got those images you sent me, so we can go ahead and use those. But that'll be fine.
All right.
Yeah, no, it's a good time. I mean, it's one of those topics that I think people would just can just listen, without really having to watch anything. And so yeah, yep. All right. So what do you got planned for the rest of the day?
Oh, I've got to work through till about 5 today. Then I'm going out with a bunch of friends to watch a soccer game. So.
Okay. Wait, so are you over in the UK?
Oh no, I've lived in the US for about 20 years.
Yeah. What city are you in?
Arlington, Texas, which is halfway between Dallas and Fort Worth.
Oh, okay. So you're watching. What's the team down in Texas?
Oh no! When I say watching a game, it's there's like a big bar locally, and every Friday night they play one of the English soccer teams on the big screen.
Okay.
I don't even know who it's going to be tonight, but I'll watch it. So.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I've had some Brits on the last few days, and and just funny enough. They've all been Yorkshiremen, and I've been a long-suffering Leeds United man, and I grew up watching them have success, and then a drought, and then success, and then another drought. And I'm thinking, I can't understand how a team like that can just kind of let things go off the rails like they do. Anyway, but I'm speaking with, do you know Thiago? I've got to learn how to pronounce his second name, from Brazil, the UFO guy.
What's his name? Thiago.
Thiago, hang on, I got it right here. He's the Thiago Luiz Teixeira.
Oh yeah, I met him once at a conference in Brazil.
Yeah, I think they've got a conference going on down there this weekend. But I'm speaking to him at 1:00.
Oh, cool.
Just on the Brazilian UFO topic. I reckon the stuff down there kind of blows your mind that's going on down there.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff and a lot of violent cases as well.
Yeah. I started noticing that years ago watching some of the UFO shows, and all the violent stuff either came out of Brazil or Mexico. Yeah. Must be something to do with the Latinos.
Yeah.
Anyway, Nick, I won't hold you up any longer. Really appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon. One
last thing for you, Dean. When does this? When this goes out, let me know, and I'll link it to my blog and Twitter and Facebook and whatever. And can people watch it? Yeah, we're going. Once we get all the interviews in, we've got a landing page where we'll start really hooking into in the next week or so, and
and then we've got to get out and kind of promote it a bit. And we had originally scheduled for the 6th, 7th, and 8th of December. So what people do, they'll just sign up free, and then if they wanted to, they wanted to get the whole lot in one hit. I'm not even sure what kind of a fee the guys are putting on it, but it's not going to be anything exorbitant. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking of maybe leaving it till broadcasting it not until the first week of January, and so kind of hope it. Thinking it might get lost up on all the Christmas stuff.
I get you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're going to meet in the next week or two, and we'll thrash it out. But the landing page is it's up there. I mean, you can log onto it, but there's no clickable links on it, and there's no. I mean, I haven't done all the speakers or anything like that, and then I got a photo of myself way down the bottom there. It's all got to be rejigged, but they'll jump on it as soon as I get the last couple of interviews done.
Mm-hmm. No, okay, cool.
Yep. But no, looking forward. And then after this, I want to do my own podcast, and and I mean, I've got all this material as well, but I wanted actually the podcast, kind of podcast I want to do is maybe just a 30-minute podcast, and try and get a different guest on every week, and get subscribers to write in their questions, and just go through as many questions as we can during a 30-minute program. Basically, just answer stuff that people want to know, and
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, kind of along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's kind of in the works. So yeah, that's pretty exciting.
All right, good stuff.
Yep. Out of the mainstream and into the ufology topic. It's been great. All right, Nick. Thanks a lot. We'll talk again soon. I'll let you know when everything's going to happen.
All right, sounds good. See you later.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for Aliens Revealed Live on the Paranormal UK radio network. Next week, more from the Aliens Revealed Live files. And as always, keep looking upwards and take care.